Hey there. What you're watching is a speedrun of Nightshade played on the PlayStation 2. This was recorded and played on February 25th, 2016. And for this playthrough, I'll be using Hisui. Nightshade is a direct sequel to the PS2 game Shinobi that came out the previous year. It features a new playable character such as Hibana, and it features 3 unlockable characters that you can unlock under certain conditions. Hisui is one of the hidden characters you unlock by beating the game on easy. And the big difference between her and every other character in the game is her run speed. She actually has the fastest run speed out of every character in the game. That includes Hibana, Joe, and Hatsuma. You can play as Hatsuma if you have a clear file of Shinobi and you beat the game and you beat Nightshade on normal. And you unlock Joe by playing certain missions a certain number of times and you randomly unlock him. There are a few key differences between Nightshade and Shinobi from a gameplay perspective, and I'll cover them as we progress through the video. The first thing I want to talk about is Hibana's and Hisui's sword charge. Unlike Hatsuma's, where it's a sword charge and he flies across the room, Hibana's and Hisui's works as a projectile, and it gets stronger as you collect chakra. And you could collect chakra from level pieces scattered throughout the level or your combo counter. The higher the combo counter goes, the more chakra you fill up. And you can fill up the chakra gauge by hits. And both Hisui and Hibana both have a specific attack, which is back and square while locking on the enemy, which is used specifically to build up chakra. And the chakra is really important, primarily for boss fights, not so much for scrub mobs that you fight throughout the majority of the game. Now, I didn't talk about it earlier, but the reason why I tank the rocket hits as opposed to kicking them back is simply because it saves time, as opposed to just kicking the rocket and then sending it back to the jet and watching it slowly fly back. You do get bonus items such as scrolls, chakra, and a hidden coin, but for the sake of the speedrun, we're only worried about chakra. And to quick kill this boss, the chakra gauge doesn't matter. It's not until future levels where it becomes a bigger deal. And speaking of boss fight, here comes the very first boss. All we're gonna do is just use 2 fire scrolls and just like that take them down. The strategies that you use to speedrun this game don't really differ between easy and normal, which is why I prefer to run the game on easy. Also, it's a lot easier to get chakra. Now, there's one glitch that you'll see me use on this stage, not in this particular segment, but later on, is I get to skip entire mob fights. Because unlike Shinobi, where the stages are closed off spaces, a lot of the levels in Nightshade are more open, which allows you to go out of bounds, so to speak. And as you're going to see here in a second, I'm going to go under the spawn gate and stop enemies from spawning. I was actually supposed to fight a mob there, but I didn't. And I'm going to go under and dash through the loading zone to proceed to the next area. I'm going to use those glitches a couple more times in this stage and one more time on stage 10. So basically how the glitch works is, if you move around or under a specific segment of the screen, you won't trigger any mob fights that normally spawn if you traverse the stage as the game's intended you to do. Like you see here, I'm actually going to go around and under another trigger gate that will spawn 4 or 5 waves of enemies. And we just proceed to the next stage. Normally you'll be fighting 4 to 6 mobs of enemies, and that takes up quite a bit of time, so we don't have time for that. I would do the same on this segment, but I actually messed up. I wasn't low enough. That's what happened. In some stages, on stage 10, if you mess it up, you waste a lot of time, or in worst case, die. Whereas this game, it doesn't waste that much time, but it's enough. The reason why I didn't bother restarting is because I'm so far into the stage that it would have been slower for me to restart and attempt to glitch again, as opposed to just fight out the mob. In that gate that you see that's ahead of me, I'm going to jump around it, and instead of fighting another 6-7 mobs of monsters that I'm intending to fight in order to proceed, we're just going to jump around it and head straight to boss. Nightshade, just like Shinobi, suffers from whoops boss syndrome, but not to the extent of Shinobi. This boss, I actually got a good pattern. He has another pattern where if he lays down his shield and you hit him, he turns into a wheel and spin around the stage. That eats up about 10-15 seconds. So I got lucky on that pattern where he just stick his tentacles to the ground, and I was just able to use the fire scroll 3 times and level 1 sword charge projectile to take him out. This stage is one of the few closed off stages that we'll be going through on the game. A lot, like I said earlier, a lot of the stages in the game are pretty open, which leads us to perform some very interesting out of bounds shenanigans. Now, I should have talked about this earlier back on stage 2, but one big difference between Shinobi and Nightshade is actually the stealth dash. In Shinobi, when you hit a enemy in the air and dash, you don't keep your air movement, you only keep the dash. So if you did a double jump, you don't get that double jump back. Well, in Nightshade, not only do you get your air dash and your double jump back, but you also get a kick. And the kick kind of works as a second air dash, and the kick functions the same way. As long as the kick or your sword connects, you retain all your air movements, which is really useful for Hibana and Hisui, which allows them to cross Tate bridges that Joe or Hatsuma, while they can cross them, you can tell it's clearly not meant for them to cross. This stage is one of the more straightforward stages in the game. All you do is go down a linear corridor and just kill thrash mobs as fast as possible. Unlike Shinobi, there's not a lot of utility with the 3 scrolls that you get. You usually only use the fire scroll for bosses and the wind scroll just a couple times to get through a couple segments. Usually stages that has like some sort of hazard on the ground, like water or the slime that I was passing over.
Stop wasting.
Also, I missed talking about it a couple times throughout the run so far, but also another difference between Shinobi, I'm sorry, you're gonna have to forgive me, but since these games are very similar, I'm gonna make a comparison between this game and Shinobi. But anyways, unlike Shinobi, when in Shinobi you initiate a Tate sequence and you use a shuriken to kill the boss, the shuriken won't count towards the Tate sequence and it will abruptly end it. Well, Nightshade, you don't have to worry about that. You can snipe enemies from afar with the kunai and continue the Tate, sometimes even ending it if it's the last enemy, and it just proceeds like normal. So there's some strats involving freezing the end game time. Yeah, you can see another good example of keeping all my air movement options to perform that Tate bridge that wouldn't be possible with Hatsuma or Joe. I believe they made this game more combat oriented. They try to make this game more combat oriented by adding 3 or 4 survival stages where all you're doing is killing mobs. And they also made the level designs more built for ground combat, but they really gave you an abundance of air movement options in this game as opposed to Shinobi. So that's kind of an interesting, a very interesting design choice, one that I accept. Like, I really enjoy the movement of this game. Now, for the upcoming boss is another boss that has a oops boss syndrome. We can't one cycle him as soon as we start the boss. We have to let him go through a cycle, and he has 2 sets of AI patterns he can go for. He can either shoot slime ball at you at the ground, or he can spit out poison gas. If he spit out poison gas, we can immediately expose his weak spot, hit him with 2 charge shots, and just end the boss right there. And yes, I believe he's going for the 2nd pattern. No, he's going for the 3rd pattern. Oops, my mistake. I lied. He's going for the 1st. So as you're going to see, we're going to kick his mouth open and just 2 charge shots. Again, the strat also works on normal, but the timing for it it's a little bit stricter on normal as opposed to easy mode. Now, stage 4 is the first break the target stage. And then, unlike Shinobi, where the seals are placed in more straightforward linear fashion, this game they kind of make you go out of your way to attack the seals, so sniping is a bit more prevalent in this game. Also a bit harder too, because a lot of the mobs are placed in areas you don't really need them to be as far as sniping goes. Like those two armored minions that spawn right in front of the seal, they move between back and forth, and even though I missed their pattern, you can squeeze out a kunai in between the two. And yes, as you can tell, it doesn't follow the same stage pattern as Shinobi, where you have a segment and a B segment. It's just stage 1 and bam, stage 2. And they offset that by making the stages in this game a lot longer than Shinobi, where Shinobi had traditional 2 segment. You had 1 long segment on the boss. This game is split up to, the stages are split up to 4 segments, with the exception of the quote-unquote survival stages, as I mentioned earlier, which is going to be another one after this stage. One major change that they made to enemies in this game is that because they added a kick mechanic, a lot of the enemies are armored, meaning Hibana and Hisui can't actually hurt them until you kick them and expose their armor or break it off completely. Hatsuma doesn't have to worry about that because his sword armor breaks, but his sword armor breaks and he pretty much plays exactly like his Shinobi counterpart, which includes the whole Akujiki draining your life away bit. Another thing I should note about Nightshade is that Nightshade is a very combat-oriented game as opposed to Shinobi. believe Nightshade has about 4 different stages where there is 0 platforming. It's just wave after wave after wave of enemies. Stage 1, stage 5, 6, and 9 are literally nothing but survival sort of stages. So forgive me if there's a bit of dead air in the commentary, but I firmly believe during those stages the actions kind of just speaks for themselves. But I can talk about this upcoming boss fight. He's one of the cooler bosses in this game in my opinion. He throws wind blooms, summons hurricanes, minions from said hurricanes, all that good stuff. And it's a shame because we're not going to see any of that in this speedrun. We're going to kill him before he gets the chance to. The quick kill strat against him is to simply hit him in the back twice with 2 fire scrolls. The problem with that is sometimes his AI likes to be fickle and will just instantly turn around on the frame that you hit the button, and you don't get anywhere near as much damage as you normally would getting a back attack. You'll only do about maybe 25-30% of his life. I think I missed the first fire scroll, but I get the second, so I still do enough damage to the point where I can kill him. Yeah, I missed the first, but I got the second, already brought him down to 50%. And all we gotta do now is just mash back square while holding the lock on button and just hit him in the back. It does so much damage. If you don't feel comfortable doing that, you could play it safe and wait for the minions to spawn and then just do a level 1 sword charge attack, but I felt pretty confident that I was able to get the quick kill before he was able to summon the minions and I wasn't able to do anything. And here we are with another survival type stage. But unlike the other ones that we've done so far, it doesn't involve moving platforms in a bottomless pit. Instead, it just features a wide open area with a bunch of containers and monsters are going to spawn. I did miss that Tate on purpose to get the chakra out of the box. I wanted to get it before I lost my spot on the stage and completely missed it, and it's something I'm going to need for the upcoming boss. One of the few things I can talk about at this stage. Even though the stage is very well possible with Hatsuma and Joe, you can tell they play favorites with Hisui and Hibana, and Hatsuma and Joe were kind of an afterthought. They weren't thought of until last seconds, like, oh, we need some bonus features in this game. Let's just add 2 playable characters and don't change anything about them. With Tate Bridges obviously meant for Hibana, where you have Hatsuma, he can't dash, or he doesn't have a kick either. Well, he has the ground kick, but it doesn't function the same as Hisui.
no use.
That boss fight could have went a little bit better, but other than missing the third chakra shot, it went by pretty well. It went by about as well as you could have expected. You can also play it safe and wait for it to spawn its minions, but again, during the speedrun we don't have time for that. And look at this, what did I tell you? Another survival type stage. This time we're on, instead of a moving plane or a container yard, we're fighting alongside fire trucks, or on top of fire trucks rather, exploding fire trucks at that.
You're too weak.
After you kill a certain mob, the fire trucks will start to explode, and you have to jump to the next one before either the truck explodes and you die, or if you jump too early you miss the jump and you die. Now that we're back from another auto-scroller slash survival type stage, talk about this boss, or what's left of this boss anyway. Again, another cool boss who would shoot fireworks at you and explosives. A very cool concept for the type of ninjas in this game. Now, unfortunately, again, we don't see him do any of that because we kill him before we get the chance. And unfortunately, I missed my level 3 chakra shot. Otherwise, he would have been down a few seconds faster. Now, for stage 7, unfortunately, I'm excited about the fact that I could talk about this stage. This stage is primarily a break the target stage. And like I said earlier in the run, a lot of the seals in this game are placed in very out of your way, as opposed to the linear fashion of Shinobi, which is fine for the most part because as you're seeing, it's routed to the point where I could still go about it in a similar type fashion. But then they added probably one of the worst things that you could fight in this sort of game, even worse than the ninja dogs in Shinobi. Hatsuma doesn't have a problem because his sword charge attack also armor breaks, and these guys are armored, but Hibana and Hisui has to kick each one individually to armor break them before they can kill them. And just like the dogs, they can block and attack at the same time. And what you're seeing me doing is a launcher type move to launch him in the air, and then I do my aerial kick, which works as a dive kick, and it ground slams them. That ground slam creates an explosion, or a shockwave, if you will, and armor break all the enemies that are surrounding them, which is very convenient for these guys. It works great for crowd control. Now for this specific area, before I take out that seal, I'm gonna need 8 shurikens. So I can do a shuriken burst between these 2 walls and break 2 seals that we normally would have to traverse around this entire segment in order to find. And there goes that little segment. This segment is the same way, you just breaking the targets in order to proceed, except this time, instead of going down linear corridors, you're going to be going down an elevator shaft. Now the main reason why I keep those guys alive is so I can stay in the air, since like I said before, as long as you hit an enemy with either a kick or a sword slash, you stay in the air and keep all your movement options, which is very important for taking out seals such as those or traversing through the stage. And fortunately for this game, those little midget ninjas that I'm fighting, they're only on this stage and stage 8. They're not in any other stage and throughout the entire game, nor is that specific type of enemy is in this game, thank goodness. For this segment, I could do the same, such as using the enemies as an air bridge and just take out the seals that way, or I could just use the lightning scroll, which I'm doing now, and which allows me to traverse over any sort of dangerous terrain without taking any damage and go relatively fast too. Now, since I ran out of shurikens before this segment, I couldn't exactly perform a specific individual level strat, which involves you falling down this pit and taking out each of the seals one at a time with the kunai. So instead what I'm going to do is, instead of doing that, I'm just going to jump down instead and take them out with my sword. It's not as fast, but considering the fact that I don't have any shurikens, it's the second best thing I could do, as opposed to just going down this segment normally, which would take you quite a while too. This is normally about a minute and a half, 2 minutes if you're playing it casually, and maybe even more if you're willing to take out all the mobs who are going for S rank. And just like that, we're done with this segment, and now we're fighting another boss. This time we're fighting a giant flaming Giant flaming bug is the best way I can describe it. Or moth, butterfly, whatever. Anyways, after you use the fire scroll to take out its armor, you can attack its weak spot, which is the head. Normally, in a normal playthrough, you would just wait until the monsters spawn as minions, and you just use a level 1 sword charge shot and just take them out. But I find it to be faster to just take them out normally like this, as opposed to waiting for them to fly around, drop bombs on you, and then wait for them to land again in order for you to take them out. Because doing it that way, granted it's safer and you're guaranteed the kill, it takes up like a minute. It makes the stage a minute longer than it should be. So instead of doing that, we're just going to attack it head on. And that's one thing I should have talked about during the boss fights. The boss fights, unlike Shinobi where they have a lot of invincibility frames after you hit them, Nightshade is the complete opposite. Outside of select few, bosses don't have a lot of invincibility frames, so you can mash your attack button and still do a considerable amount of damage. This stage is pretty neat just because it's the only stage of its kind in Shinobi where instead of breaking seals or defeating mobs to just advance, all you're doing is you're just trying to get out of the building before it explodes. So you just go from start to finish as fast as possible. Probably one of the few stages in the game where this game intends for you, the game wants you to speed run it. And this is also the stage where you get to see just how fast Hisui really is. Because when she's running on the wall, she runs almost as fast as Hibana and Hatsuma dashing just normally. Her run speed is that fast. It's a shame that I spend so much time dashing on the ground or in the air that I can't really exploit that, because her run speed is just ridiculous. And it's really a sight to see. Now, the reason why I'm going out of my way to pick up the little chakra bits from the bigger enemies is because I'm going to need them for the quick kill on this boss fight. And the chakra bits are not random, they drop from specific enemies, usually bigger enemies, the same enemies that would normally drop health. Instead, they drop chakra. One thing to note is, and this explains why I'm wall running instead of just dashing on the ground, your sword does almost double damage if you attack from a wall as opposed to just standing or in the air. I don't know if that was intentional or just an oversight, but because you're doing double damage, it allows you to take out the blockades in 6 hits or 3 hits as opposed to 6. And we're just gonna run through these little mobs, casually ignoring them, and we're just gonna make our way straight to the boss. Gonna be fighting Kurigane again, but this time he fires lasers from the sky and rocket fists. Unfortunately, he doesn't do rocket fists instead, but he does fire the laser from the sky. But he won't do that until his second phase, or right now, once he summons some minions. Which is great, which is what we want him to do. Makes him an easy target to pick him off with the charge shot. Just like that. Unfortunately, everyone's favorite sort of stages, survival slash auto scrollers. This time, instead of fire trucks, we're on boats. And instead of fireworks shooting at the trucks to explode, it's a submarine. This is pretty much just a reskin of the first stage. We had to kick the missiles back. This time, unlike the first stage, we have to kick the missiles in order to get the chopper gauge for the quick kill on this boss, which we will need a level 3 for. We can't get by with a level 1 or 2 like we've done with the other bosses. Now that we're done with the fourth and final little survival segment of the game, hopefully there won't be much, if any, dead time. This boss is one of the more interesting bosses, probably actually the most interesting boss in the game, just because when he starts out, he can teleport between 1 to 3 spaces, and each space has a different set pattern in which the pillars will spawn. And each time you hit him, he teleports and moves to a different spot. So he actually takes quite a bit of skill to kill normally. But of course in a speedrun, not really the case. Speedrun, he's actually probably the easiest boss of the game, next to the very first boss of the game. All you do is just kill the mobs and just have a level 3 stocked, and bam, there you go. Now stage 10 is... it's essentially like stage 2, but longer. We're going to be using the same glitch that we used in stage 2 in order to stop monsters from spawning and just proceed to the stage as fast as possible. The first glitch when I went under the bridge actually prevented more mobs from this area to appear, and I didn't have to destroy as many seals, only about 3 or 4. The second glitch, the second set of glitches I had to do, I actually messed this one up. I don't know what causes it. I can go under the stage to the point where I'm almost dead, dash under, and the monsters will still spawn. See, I even messed it up again there, and I went even lower than last time. Now this time I'm going to do the exact same thing, and bam, they don't spawn. But at least you get to see the glitch in action and what it does exactly. And this time, instead of going over and under the trigger, instead we're going to be going around the light post and just proceed on to the segment. Otherwise, I will have to fight two or three mobs in that area to advance. And a fun fact, this is actually the stage where we fight Hisui, so this is going to be a quote-unquote mirror match, but obviously, Boss Hisui is a lot more powerful than the Hisui we're controlling. So, they used a little bit of thought when they came to making this character playable. Now you're noticing I'm skipping all the seals that I would normally shoot to proceed. That's why we're just going to clip under the gate and just go through it, proceeding to the next area. And we're going to be doing this glitch one more time to make it straight to the final boss instead of having to fight God knows how many waves of monsters. And there we go. Now we're on to the boss, and that's also the last time we'll ever be seeing that glitch in action. Hisui in this fight is pretty straightforward outside of her second phase. Her second phase consists of her jumping to the other side of the screen and filling the stage with water. Filling it high enough to the point where you can't run. You can't run and your dash goes very short. And what she does in that stage normally is skate around the water shooting projectiles at you. But we're going to nullify all that by hitting her before she can even move. Now the water dissipates and we can fight her like normal again. And I messed up the quick kill. I somehow messed up the quick kill there. I'm not exactly sure how I messed it up. I'm not sure if the projectile either just missed completely or it dissipated before it could even get to her. And you just saw me restart about 3 times in this stage. This is something I should probably bring up. Unlike Shinobi, where the end game timer resets itself when you die or pause, in Nightshade that's not the case. The end game timer still goes, so it's more acceptable to restart in this game because your timer is still gonna go. Had I not restarted this stage, my time would have been about 2 minutes and 17 seconds, not almost 3 minutes, as we're going to see. Yep, 3 minutes exactly. So yes, resetting does add to the endgame timer. Now stage 11 and 12 are huge throwbacks to the Shinobi stages, to the Shinobi 7, to the Shinobi 8A, 8AB stages, even down to the music, which I think is a very, very neat touch. And yes, you are seeing me going out of my way to collect the little chakra. That's because we're at the end of the stage, we're gonna have to fight a giant door, just like in 8A on Shinobi. This stage I only have to fight specific mobs, and in this segment, instead of going around having to fight a lot of mobs, about 3 or 4, instead I'm going to go use the lightning scroll to head into this hidden area in the waterfall and just take out this mob instead. This easily takes out about 45 seconds to a minute, depending on how fast you are to fight the other mobs. I think I could have made this transition a lot faster had I killed 2 of the monsters normally, or cut the Tate short as opposed to letting the Tate rock and having to wait for all the little blood pellets to unlock the gate. And that reset was a really silly execution error. I hit the activation button for this scroll as opposed to the shuriken burst. And as you saw on just a few seconds ago and on stage 10, shuriken bursts do indeed break armor, and it's very useful for taking out mobs in the air, actually. It saves you quite a bit of time as opposed to kicking each monster individually and breaking their armor off. This final segment of the game intends you to use each of the enemies as a Tate bridge to make it through one side of the wall to the next without touching the water and falling and dying. But we're just going to skip all that by using the lightning scroll and just dashing our way through that entire segment. And now we're almost done with the game. Very reminiscent of the final parts of 8A, having to do the climb up to the final area and defeating a giant door. Except this time, you don't have to fight 8, 9 enemies to kill the door. You only have to fight 3. 3 enemies and a level 2 charge shot.
I will prove myself.
Stage 12. Oh god, stage 12. This stage is easily the worst stage out of this entire game. Maybe even worse than stage 8A or 8B even. Not really so much for this segment, because this segment, after you play it a couple of times, it's pretty straightforward. All we're doing is attacking all the stilts with our kunai and just proceed to the next area. Now, it is a bit confusing if you're playing on a TV like mine, which is a bit darker, and you can't see a lot of the background. So you find yourself going the wrong way a couple of times. Thankfully, I didn't have that problem here. Thanks to shoutouts to turning up the brightness. But yes, it's the third and fourth segment of this stage that's really the showstopper of this stage, because it's like you can tell, this game was not, even though it has platforming elements, the game was geared around ground-based combat, and when you have to do platforming segments and a game with a camera as wonky as this, it's pretty disastrous. And it doesn't help that a lot of the platforms are very small, filled with giant monsters that don't need to be there. I know it's already been passed, but the last set of seals that I have to break, specifically the one where I had to use the shuriken burst, I used that shuriken burst in that particular spot because had I would have stepped a few paces further, I would have had to fight a mob to get out of the room, and that's not something we need to be doing right now. So instead, what I opted to do was use a shuriken burst right outside that little spawn point, which allowed me to take out the seal without having to actually fight any of the monsters in that room. Now, if I had shurikens, I wouldn't have to worry about those monsters trying to shoot me off the bridge. I would just do a shuriken burst and take them all out. But we're going to save our shurikens for the next segment. For the next segment, where I'm going to do that exact same thing, or the exact same strat I just brought up. Bam. There we go. Now I have no achievements for the rest of the stage. To this day, I'm still questioning how did I make this stage in one go, because usually at my other attempts, this stage takes me a bit, to the point where I'm an hour into the run and I die. It's not a pretty sight. Yes, we're going to skip all these enemies just to climb our way up to the top, collect any little bits of chocolate that we find, and sprint to the fourth and final segment before the boss. Now the big thing to note about these two areas is when you fall, you're falling all the way down to the bottomless pit. And there is very few spots where you can fall and you can save yourself, because you don't have a lot of control over your actions when you're free falling in the air. You can't use like directional influence to drift from a falling spot to a platform safely. You just can't. You're kind of at a standstill at that point. And if there's nothing right below you, that's a death. And there's not much you can do to stop it unless you did not use any of your movement options, and you can dash and kick towards the enemies and pray to God that the fickle camera picks up on a random monster which allows you to lock on it. Now, there was really no particular reason to take out those enemies outside of waiting for that platform to appear, simply because I missed it, and I got extremely lucky that there's a platform right there. Otherwise, that would have been a restart and a waste of about, at this point, probably a minute. And now, what is easily the hardest segment of the game is now over. Up next is just going to be two pathetically easy bosses regardless of what difficulty you're playing on. This boss, we can't exactly hurt him at first. We just have to dodge his attacks and just hit him in the face 3 times before the boss fight really begins. After we hit him in the face, he's going to close his face back up and 2 hands are going to spawn from the ground. The boss won't pop back up above ground until we take out the 2 hands. And the game does help you take out those 2 hands faster by, by giving you minions to kill. Otherwise, those hands usually take a bit of time to kill. Not a lot, but a little bit. Now, that time I didn't bother using any of the fire scrolls, so I can build up my chakra gauge for level 3 and be allowed to instantly one-shot this boss. If you don't have enough chakra to one-shot this boss, getting the second cycle isn't that hard, because as long as you hit him with at least a level 2, you're still taking out 75-80% of his life. It's just a matter of you have to waste another 10-15 minutes for the enemies to respawn and give you another chance at attacking. But thankfully, I was able to get the 1 cycle down. And now we're at stage 13, the final boss in the game. And this boss, compared to Shinobi's final boss, is a joke. Even on hard difficulty, he's just flat out easy. Unlike Shinobi, where we can hurt him right away, I mean, where we can't hurt him right away, this boss we can actually hurt right away, and it's more feasible to one-shot him. Now, what we're doing, we're actually stun locking, well, quote unquote, stun locking his animation by doing the lock on while locking on and mashing back square. We're locking him into an animation mode where he will attack us with his, where he will try to counterattack with his sword. But what we end up doing is we end up dashing backwards, allowing this sword attack to whip and allowing us to continue the loop again. And now that he's done Divine Judgment, it allows us to kill his little minions to build up enough to build our sword level to level 3 and one-shot him. We don't have to worry about him teleporting across the stage or being invincible when he's counterattacking or any of that good stuff. We can just take him out as simply as that. And that's stage 13, and that's Nightshade. Final in-game time is 44:41, and yes, this is a personal best of mine. I hope you enjoyed watching, and peace out.